Hari Om. Most welcome. Good evening. Yes.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the continuation of the discussion on the Yoga Sutras. This meeting will be recorded and will be posted on YouTube. If you have missed any of the previous discussions, you may find it on YouTube. Also, if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself so as to minimize the disturbances. Thank you.
Thank you.
This meeting is being recorded.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham alam sharirasya cha vaidagena yopakuruttam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi stuve patanjalim vyasam shankaram cha munitrayam kartra sutrasya bhashyasya kramadvivaranasya cha. I think we were discussing the 19th sutras. In fact, 18, 19 and 20, these sutras are interrelated. We should not get away with the impression that is vibhutis, the results or the powers that the Yoga Sutras tell us that we acquire as a result of samyama, or something supernatural, something irrational, something occult. So Patanjali is giving a very scientific analysis of how this happens. Just as we exercise our physical powers, we derive great powers, great skills, extraordinary powers and skills at the physical level. So also when we exercise our mind, when we bring to the surface some of the hidden skills and powers of the mind also rediscovers within itself certain powers and skills. So in the 18th sutra, we just started, I think, this 18, 19 and 20, these are all interrelated. Samskara Sakshatkaranat Purva Jati Jnanam, that is the 18th sutra. What it essentially tells us is that when we do samyama on our own samskaras, we will get an idea of our previous life cycles. So, jadi here means Janma in Sanskrit, means the previous life cycles. So, of course, this should be understood only in the light of the commentaries. So Vyasa has got a very, very simple commentary. He says, Devi khalu imi samskaraha smrutiklesha hetuvu vasana rupaha vipaka hetuvu dharma rupaha. So he talks about two types of samskaras. So what are samskaras? I already said earlier on many occasions that samskaras are a unique contribution to modern psychology of the Patanjali system. So, of course, it was essentially developed in the commentaries by Vyasa. What it essentially means is this: whatever we do consciously, with full awareness, it produces a result within our own mental system, an impact which is not immediately felt or lost. See, when we do something noble, it has an effect on our mind. When we do something wrong, that also has an effect on the mind. So that tendency, when it gets consolidated, it becomes a strong action-oriented tendency. It's not just a memory, but that memory, a number of identical memories, when they get accumulated together, they become a potent force. So it is called a samskara in Sanskrit. Samskara itself means something that affects, refines, processes, and so on. And some of these samskaras are, of course, they are on the nature of memories which give birth to kleshas. Kleshas, extreme likes and dislikes, or fear or anguish or anxiety, the raga, dvesha, abhinivesha. That's the second, third and fourth of it. Raga, dvesha and abhinivesha. Avidya, asmita are the foundations, but this is how our mind reacts to situations and circumstances. Either extreme liking or extreme dislike, or maybe a tendency to avoid, abhinivesha. Or it could be in the form of a sense of right and wrong. Because we develop a kind of sense of right and wrong. Our own moral philosophy we develop as a result of our own recurrent, our own memory, our own awareness of what happened to us, what we experienced, and based on that we come to some ethical, moral principles. We may read books on ethics and morality, or what is constitutional propriety, or what is ethical propriety, or spiritual propriety, but we have our own intuitive, natural way of coming at a decision as to what is the right and what is the wrong, so far as we are concerned. What is the right thing, what is the wrong thing. So this is that dharma, adharma rupa. Now here Vyasa gives a very interesting, it's a very famous analysis of how we may derive at some understanding of our own previous life cycles. On the surface, see, when you look at the whole thing from the standpoint of the theological doctrines of the Abrahamic religions, which do not believe in the concept of previous life cycles, purva janmas, which actually believe there's only one life. When life is nothing that begins, something that begins with birth, and you live and then you die. That's all. But religious traditions of Oriental origin, Buddhism, Hinduism mainly, and of course even other traditions, Jainism, Sikhism and so on, they all believe in this continuation of life based on our own actions and the results. So here Vyasa is giving a very unique, famous analysis of this. So what he says is, te purva bhava abhisamskritaha parinama cheshta nirodha shakti jivana dharmavad aparidishtaha chitta karmaha. So what Vyasa says is, these samskaras which are formed in previous life cycles, what are they? Those samskaras are being explained in a previous sutra. This is something very important for us to remember. These sutras are interrelated. So unless we read them in the context of the previous sutras, we won't be able to understand the real implication of many of these statements. So in this paragraph, in this Sanskrit sentence, Vyasa is referring to something that he already explained in his commentary on the 15th sutra, where he says, Nirodha dharma samskaraha parinamaha adha jivanam cheshta shaktischa chittasya dharma darshana varjidaha iti. What he says is, what are these samskaras? Our innate natural changes. What are they? Restraining samskaras, a tendency. In our own mind, we may have a tendency, well, I should not do this. Or this is enough, no more. A kind of self-restraining samskara, which you find among the refined, cultured people in polite conversations, in discussions, what words we should use, how we should behave, how we should conduct ourselves in polite circles, polite society, and so on. Restraining samskaras. And then, of course, a sense of right and wrong, which are mutually related. And then we may have certain tendencies which are not openly expressed but strongly felt within. Want to do certain things, or actions, or behavior, or interactions, everything may be influenced by certain hidden, latent tendencies. They are called samskara. That's a real understanding of samskara. Something that is already there within, but not obvious. But those samskaras influence, they define our actions, the way we speak, the way we react to circumstances, the way we respond to different challenges in our life. All these are influenced by the samskaras. And then there are certain samskaras which can modify, change our behavior patterns. Then a tendency, somehow a strong tendency, a strong will to survive, that is called jivanam. Then sometimes there are samskaras which act as a wavering tendency of the mind. It could be a kind of course in Sanskrit language they call mrudu, tivra, etc. Means a mild tendency or an extreme intense tendency, common in all samskaras. So all these are different expressions, different manifestations of the influences of our own previous experiences in life. We can very easily see this. You can tell me if you are a teacher, for example, if you are especially even in the lower primary schools, kindergarten, how kids behave, children behave. From that you can understand how those children are treated, what kind of bringing up. Or maybe if you just observe or you analyze the behavior, the conversation style of a person, and if you just do samyama, means intense concentration, try to analyze, you can get an idea of what kind of training, what kind of upbringing the person has behaved. A child who has got erratic behavior, wrong behavior, abnormal behavior, may have some problems, the parentage, bringing up, and so on. It's all interrelated. How do we derive this? You may call it inference. We call inference. In Sanskrit called anumana, one of the pramanas. Pratyaksha anumana upamanas, arthavati, anubhavalabdhi, etc. All these are different epistemological tools. But in real life, when we try to observe something and do intense concentration, then you find you get a deeper insight into what we are studying, what we are observing. That is actually an aspect of samyama. So what Patanjali tells us, Vyasa in his commentary on Patanjali Sutras tells us is simple. It's a very simple fact. I mean, if you observe, let's say if you observe our own behavior, how I acted, how I talked, how I behaved, we feel a great attraction towards, let's say, spiritual idea, a sudden attraction for some kind of spiritual teachings. Read a wonderful book from the library, and we feel like we get feeling at home with the ideas expressed in that book. That's possible only if there are some samskaras in our mind, which helps us to connect with the ideas expressed in that book. When we listen to a talk, if you want to understand it correctly, even in these secular subjects, physics, chemistry, or anything, if you already know something about it, we are able to understand, comprehend what we are learning. Similarly, if there are deep-rooted latent tendencies, samskaras in our system, coming from previous life cycles, then it's a sure indication that they are helping us to understand a subject. A child prodigy, let's say in music or any kind of art or in anything, a child who shows extraordinary skills in picking up and mastering skills, for example. Sometimes in a family, you find children showing extraordinary skill and aptitude for music, art, or literature. In a family where there is no such background, from the biological, genetic background, there is no way to explain this. So, Vyasa will tell you it is coming from previous samskaras. That's why teshu samyamaha, samskara sakshagyaye samarthaka. If you do samyama, if you do the dharana, dhyanam and samadhi, together it's called samyama, ekatra samyama. Samyama we already discussed here. Dharana, dhyanam, samadhi, together we call samyama. The 6th, 7th and 8th part of the Ashtanga Yoga. So if you do concentration and then deeper concentration and then immersed in that, then you are able to go deeper into what you are concentrating upon. You are able to get an insight into what you are trying to concentrate upon. And now, if you do this in the context of your own impulses, why did I talk like that? Why did I behave like that? Why does this person talk like that? If you do some yama on that mystery, then Vyasa says you will be able to trace the origin of that particular behavior pattern to some of that person's previous experience, as they do in modern counseling. But suppose there is a behavior pattern which you cannot in any way explain in the light of the previous experiences of this life. Then the same logic, if you extend beyond the span of the present life, then it should be due to an influence coming from previous life. That's why teshu samyama samskara sakshakriyaye samartha. So that samyama, that concentration, will help you to understand the previous life cycles and their influence. Nacha deshakala nimittanubhavaihi vina tesham asti sakshakarana. Now, actually, when we experience something in our own present life cycle, and when we want to try to understand, then it should happen within our own lifetime. This place, this time, in this context, it should happen. But based on what is happening right now, if you do samyama, logically when you trace the origin of that particular samskara tendency, then it should have a previous antecedent, and that is something that comes from previous life cycles. Again, we already discussed this earlier. This samyama is possible only for a person who is established in yamas and niyamas, and then who has already step by step gone through this process of asana, pranayama and pratyahara, and at up to 5, and then only you will be able to practice dharana, and then only you will be able to practice dhyana, and then you will be able to practice samadhi. So samadhi means being immersed. That's why, the Patanjali Sutra tells you that tasya bhumishu viniyogaha. Bhumi means gradual stage. When you go to a university, when you go to school, you have to go to the first class, first standard, then second grade, then third grade. So one cannot do this samyama unless that person is fully established in yamas and niyamas. And then at that stage, when you are fully established in yamas and niyamas and going through asana, pranayama and pratyahara, then afterwards when you reach dharana, dhyana, samadhi, then you will not parade these skills, you will not use it for any wrong purpose. It will be only blessing to you and blessing to others. So you can, as the Hindu Puranic literature, you find many examples of some undesirable characters who attained what we may call supernatural powers, and actually that became a problem to themselves and a problem for others. It became a liability to that person. Those who attained these powers without yamas and niyamas, they perished and they brought trouble to themselves and they brought trouble to others also. Today also, in today's world also, you find examples of people who may get a fragment of these powers, and of course the result will be not always desirable. I am not going to that particular area of discussion. That's why it's very important. Vibhudis, the Vibhudi Pada, this particular chapter deals with certain natural, inevitable skills and powers of the mind that a person may develop as a result of Ashtanga Yoga when practiced after mastering yamas and niyamas. This is a very, very important point. So what this particular sutra tells us is, when we try to understand more of our own tendencies, our own samskaras, our own impulses and thoughts and ideas, we try to analyze and do some yama on them, then you may get an idea of our own previous life cycles. Because the lake becomes clear and you are able to see the rock bottom. It's like a lake, chittam. Chittam in the Patanjali context always means the mental system. It includes mana, buddhi, chitta, ahangara, all the 4 compartments of antakarana, not just mind alone, the mental world. That's the meaning of chittam in the Patanjali system, according to Vajaspati, Vijnana Bhikshu and others, in their commentaries, they make it clear. Now, how does it happen? Suppose you compare a mind to a lake, and the tendencies and impressions, you compare them to waves, different layers at a lake. Right? So because of so much of mud, so much of filth and dirt, you can't see the raw bottom of the lake. But suppose somehow you clean the lake, then you can see the rock bottom. Or let's say another example. Suppose you have left, let's say you are a native of another country, let's say India, many of you maybe, and you have left India maybe 50, 60 years back, and you are living in the United States, let's say for 60 years. You are now maybe 90 years. So 60 years you have lived in this country, you have not visited India. You don't know anything about what happened to your family or anything. Now when you look back to your previous life, you will be thinking of, you will have a clear picture of what all happened, what all really happened in your family. Let's say when you were 20 years or 10 years. Because the 60 years, your memories are all linked to your life in the United States. And till your 30th year, you lived in India. So when you try to recollect, let's say, when you try to recollect what happened, some of the memories related to your life, let's say 60 years back, you will be able to recollect more or less very clearly. Why? Because there's a wide gap. For 60 years, you didn't have any event, any memory related to your life in India because you are not in India. You are in this country. But suppose you are living in India and you are 90 years, then you may not always remember because all the events and memories are mixed together, related to the same desha, kala, nimitta, same country, same place, in the same home you lived, you won't remember. But if your cousin was the one who took you to the airport 60 years back when you were coming to this country, you may remember the name of that cousin 60 years after. But you have visited many times during these years, then you won't remember because what happened, it gets mixed up. So it's just like a lake. I mean, when the water is clean, you are able to see, look to the bottom of the lake and you can see the rock bottom. That's why Vyasa says that itham samskara sakshatkaranat purvajadi jnanat utpaddide yoginaha. Like the yogis are able to remember and recollect their own previous life cycles. Real yogis will not go about shouting, oh, I know, I can tell you about your previous life and I can give a lecture on my own previous. Real yogi will not do. If somebody tells you, well, I could do this and for $100 per hour, it's a commercial enterprise, you can be sure that person is not a yogi. A real yogi will not do that. That's an important thing to remember. Because a real yogi, he stepped into Ashtanga Yoga after going through yamas and niyamas. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, Brahmacharya, Aparigraha. Asteya is there, Aparigraha is there, then Shauja, Santosha, Tapa. So, Santosha is the contentment. That person won't look for anything. He is perfectly happy. So he doesn't want doesn't want to demonstrate his ability to see other people's minds in the middle of a street or maybe hiring a big town hall and making a big commercial. You won't do that. That's an important thing to remember. See, a well-educated man, let's say an extremely brilliant doctor, he will not talk about his own extraordinary skills as a doctor. So that if he talks like that, he's a quack, so to speak. So it's interesting. That's why Vyasa says that itham samskara sakshatkaranat purvajadi jnanam utpaddide yoginaha. And then he continues that paratra api evameva samskara sakshatkaranat parajadi samvedanam. And he doesn't stop there, Vyasa says. This is Vyasa's thesis. Well, this is one of the those who don't read Vyasa's commentary, and of course Vijnana Bhikshu and Vajaspati and other commentators who again wrote commentaries on Vyasa's commentary, they will tell you the Yoga Sutra tells you can fly in the sky, you can do all this. It is not like that. Pure scientific psychological analysis of human mind. So he says, similarly, paratra here means in the context of others also. Now this ability to understand other people's mind, other people's previous life cycles is possible only also in the context of other persons, not only in one's own life, but also with regard to the previous life cycles of other persons as well. So that is I think that the 18th sutra. Then we have 19th sutra. Yes, this is also pratyasya parachitta jnanam. Pratyasya sakshatkarana, that's the meaning. So it is called Vakya Shesha in the commentary. You say pratyasya sakshatkarana. By understanding, by doing samyama on the mind of another person or on the mental structure of our own mental structure, we will be able to understand the the mental structure, the mind of other persons. And the 20th sutra is then nacha tat salambanam tasya avishayi bhudatvad. That is of course, there is a short commentary on the 19th sutra. Pratyaye samyamat pratyayasya sakshatkarana tataha parajita jnanam. One says, Vyasa, what Patanjali means according to Vyasa, Pratyaye samyamat pratyayasya sakshatkarana. You try to get a clear idea. Pratyaya means jnana, vritti jnanam, or it could be an understanding of other people's mind, or how you observe a person, facial expression. From that, you get an idea of, you get a clear, more or less a clear idea of that person's behavior. Of course, you can't do that when you observe a well-trained diplomat who is smiling all the time. You can't say he's a wonderful man because he's trained in that. If you go to, let's say, a hotel receptionist, a flight assistant, or a builder, diplomat, they are trained to smile. Their facial expressions are trained. That's not what Patanjali or Vyasa are talking about. I often give the example in my previous session 4 years back. The well-known picture of 1938, when there was this treaty, peace treaty between British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and Adolf Hitler, smiling, shaking hands each other, smiling beautifully. The picture photo is well-known, 1938, and there's a peace treaty between Britain and Germany, and within months, Hitler attacked, invaded Poland, Czechoslovakia, and then that's how the war began. So we're smiling all the time. Does it mean that one can understand what is going on with the other person's mind by observing the facial expressions? That's not what is implied here. So this is something very important. It is not study of facial expressions. So when a person really practices yamas and niyamas, and then as an pranayama pratyahara. So pratyahara enables you to take your mind away from everything and focus on something exclusively. That's pratyahara. And then only dharana, dhyana, etc. come. So when you go through these disciplines, our mind develops a skill to look behind and beyond what is visible, what is the obvious. So that's something very important. So very often reading these, the other commentaries, people may believe it's a simple matter. Anyone can observe and understand. Any well-trained psychologist, those who are trained in intelligence services, are taught these subjects. That's not what we are talking about. What Vyasa is talking about is when you go through this training in Ashtanga Yoga, then our mind develops an ability, an intuitive power to see deep into the nature of things. And that's not just the power of mind as understood in modern psychology. It goes beyond that. It is something superior to that. A power of intuitive understanding of what is behind and what is beyond the visible, what is behind the obvious. I mean the reality behind what is seen outside. That's what the commentator is talking about here. After that we will have this 20th sutra. Now what the sutra tells us, through this samyama, one may get an idea, knowledge of other person's mind, but that you won't get an idea of the details, of the minute details. So you will get an idea of what another person is interested in, but you won't get a detailed idea of it. So salambanam here means, avishayi bhudatvat. I mean, A yogi will not concentrate on the minor details of what the other person is talking about or thinking about or is focused on. But they get a general idea of the other person's mind, attitudes and behavior. That is the real implication of this particular sutra. Salambanam means, salambanam na means you won't understand a clear understanding. This naja tat salambanam. Tat na salambanam means it is, that understanding is not a detailed understanding, a complete understanding with all objects behind the other person's focus or concentration or thought system. 21st Sutra is a very simple thing. There is nothing very profound in it. Kaya Rupa Samyama Tad Grahya Shakti Stambhe Chakshu Prakasha Asamprayogi Antarthana. What this sutra tells is, when a person practices samyama on the external form of another person, what happens is he will be able to detach the form from the object. So, how this happens is something that can only be experienced. In the traditional scriptures say Rupa and Rupi can be separated. Rupi means an object. Rupa is form. Say this is a pen. It has its form, external form. And the pen itself is Rupi, the object. And the form, the external shape, etc., is the form. Now, they are actually inseparable. A book is just a form, and the book itself is the object, and the form is the shape or form of the book. They are inseparable. But a yogi will be able to concentrate upon the form itself and will be able to dissociate the object from the form. When he does it, what happens? He can be in a place, but through samyama, he can make himself invisible to somebody. Because according to the scriptures, what it says, he will be able to make himself invisible because the other person's eyes will not be able to grasp the form. And when you don't grasp the form, then you won't see the person. Because when we say I saw the book, what I say is I saw the form of the book. That's what it means. Normally a form and the object of which is the form cannot be separated. But Yoga Sutra tells you that a yogi will be able to detach, separate one from the other. And he should do samyama on the form. So some of these sutras may not make sense unless, of course, we go deeper. So if you want any further explanation based on scriptures, you can ask during interaction. Then we have 22nd Sutra. 22nd Sutra is Sopakramam, Nirupakramam, Cha Karma, Tas Samyamat, Parantakyanam, Arishtebhyo Va. Well, it says you will be able to, essentially what it means, you will be able to tell when you are going to die. You will be able to predict what is going to happen to you and to others. That is the essence of the sutra. How this happens, we will explain in the light of Vyasa's commentary. If you have the sutra in front of you, if you have text with you, then I shall explain these words. Sopakramam. Sopakramam here means Sopakramam karma means. It means certain karmas which are already coming into fruition quickly, immediately. It's called prarabdha karma. We know that there are certain things that we did and the results are actually unfolding in front of us. It's obvious to us. We, let's say, we took medicine and we are cured of a illness or disease, whatever it is. Or we work hard, studied for the examination, and then as a result we do well in the examination. So here the word karma is used. Karma here means karma phala in Sanskrit, the results of actions. So there are two types of actions and the result to begin with. One kind of action is called prarabdha karma. Prarabdham itself means prakashena arabdha. Certain actions whose results have already started unfolding. The scholars, traditional scholars, compare this to an arrow that has left the bow. So an archer shoots an arrow, and the arrow is moving towards his target. He has no control over that. The arrow has already started. So it is prakashena arabdha, means already started, because according to in proportion to the strength with which the archer has shot the arrow, and depending upon the distance the target, it will hit the target. You can't control it. Of course, in the context of Patanjali Yoga Sutra, it cannot. In Vedanta, it can be controlled. That's a different subject, which I am not going to details. According to Vedanta, the arrow can be controlled. The direction of the arrow can be changed even when it is in flight, but not in Yoga Sutra philosophy. Same idea differs from one system of Saddarsana philosophy to another system. But in Patanjali Yoga Sutra, I will tell you, the arrow cannot be drawn. It is moving towards the target. It is called prarabdha. Like that in our life, certain karmas, certain actions we have done, the results are unfolding, they are moving to the fruition, we have no control over it. It's called sopakramam. Nirupakramam means certain actions which is agamika karma, slowly unfolding, will unfold in future. That is nirupakramam karma. Tat samyamat. Now, when you do samyama on these, a yogi will be able to parantajnanam arishtebhyo va, he will be able to get an understanding of his own death last moment, parantajnanam. I mean, arishtebhya, he means there are certain other signs, symbols, indications according to certain scriptures which tell you about a person's death, that's all. Now, this is to be understood in the light of Vyasa's commentary. First, Vyasa tells you, Ayurvipakam karma dividham sopakramam nirupakramam cha. First of all, our actions, the results, what we have done, and how we are going to bear the results of our actions can be broadly divided into two categories. One is sopakramam, means it's an upakrama, it is a beginning, we already know it is happening in front of us. The other one is it will happen maybe in future. Now, atra yatha adam vastram vidhanidam lighiyasa karena sushyet tatha sopakramam. Now, what about the fruition of the enjoyment or sufferings? Enjoyment or sufferings of our own actions, which belong to sopakrama level, prarabdha level. So Vyasa compares, suppose you have wet cloth and you have spread it on hot sun. What happens? Quickly the wet cloth will become dry. So that is one kind of actions and the results that a yogi concentrates on. Tatha cha tadeva sampindidam chirena samsushed evam nirupakramam. But suppose these clothes you didn't spread, you left them in a bundle, a huge bundle of wet clothes. You spread, you keep somewhere. You don't spread, but you just leave a pile of wet clothes. It will take a long time to get dry. So that is nirupakramam karma. Then there are other comparisons. These comparisons are classical comparisons, so we should try to get a clear idea. Because these teachings took place thousands of years back in the lineage of Patanjali Yoga Sutra tradition. So Vyasa is the most well-known and the first and maybe the most authentic commentator on Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And it comes in the lineage of the teachers and students, Guru, Sishya, Prachishya, Parambara, we call it. So these comparisons, metaphors and analogies are being handed over from generation to generation of yoga teachers. That's why it's important for us to try to understand in the light of the classical illustrations and then try to understand in the light of our own contemporary times. Yathava agnihi shushke kakshe mukto vatena sambantato yuktaka. See, suppose you have got dry grass. You want to burn it. This dry grass will burn in no time. So that can be compared to certain actions, certain karmas that have already started unfolding in our life. Yuktha kshepiyasa kalena dahet tatha swapakramam yatha va sa eva agnihi strinarashu kramashu avayaveshu Anyastrichirena dakhetata nirupakramam. Now, on the other hand, suppose you have got a huge pile of grass and may not be dry, and there also you set fire. You set fire to this huge pile of grass, all bundled together. It also will burn, but it will take some time. Like that, there are two types of actions. Our whole life can be compared, can be classified. All the events, all the experiences that we go through in our life can be grouped into these two categories. One is those actions which are already moving to fruition, already unfolding in front of us. We are already experiencing the results of these actions. And certain actions that we expect, we anticipate will happen in future, but not yet started. Now, yogi will concentrate on these actions, will do samyama on these actions and their results, and he will be able to predict, because he will get a clear idea of his own body-mind mechanism, this complex body-mind complex. And he will get a clear idea of his own body, 5 elements, and their weaknesses, how long they are going to survive. Then you have an idea of what all actions, what all results, what all experiences he is likely to experience, he likely to go through in his life. Both which are coming quickly and also those which may take longer time. And by focusing on them, he develops an intuitive power, and that helps him to predict when his life is going to end. So, in other words, when he practices samyama on the chitta samskaras, the impulses, the tendencies, attitudes, which are all lying in his own mental system, of which he is fully aware. And then when he tries to analyze his actions and experiences that are going to happen in future, then he will be able to roughly understand how long he is going to live. This is the 22nd sutra. We have about 10 minutes before Question and answer begins. The 23rd Sutra, actually it belongs to different category, but it deals with some other kind of skill or powers that a yogi develops. Maitrayadishu Belani. So this particular sutra, that 23rd sutra, in some versions of the Yoga Sutra text, it will be 23rd or 22nd, because one last sentence, one last expression, phrase in Vyasa's sutra were later detached from Vyasa's commentary and promoted to be an independent sutra of Patanjali. So a little difference in the different versions of the sutra text you will find, which are not very significant. Now the 23rd sutra is linked to another sutra. That sutra is Samadhipada 33rd sutra. Because actually the 23rd sutra of Vibhudipada, it borrows expressions from the 33rd sutra of Samadhipada. That is Maitri Karuna Mudita Upekshanam Sukadukha Punya Punya Vishayanam Bhavanataha Chitta Prasadanam. That is the sutra. What this particular sutra tells you is simple. In our life we come across different types of people. Some people who may be very similar to us, attending Yoga Sutras classes, trying to live a spiritual life, lead a spiritual life. In the midst of all other obligations and responsibilities, they try to practice meditation and things like that. This is one category. Now, the sutra tells you that we should be friendly with those people. We should be friendly with fellow spiritual seekers, those who are like us, trying to practice spiritual discipline. We should be friendly with them. We should have association with fellow spiritual seekers, because that association will strengthen and reinforce our own spiritual life. It gives a new direction actually. It's called Maitri. So how to act and how to interact, how to develop a unique behavior pattern in our life. That is the central thesis of this 33rd Sutra of Samadhipada. So there are people who are very, very similar to us. We should be friendly with them. Then there are those who may not be as fortunate as us. They are not able to read any books on Yoga Sutras or spiritual life or anything. But they are interested. You may meet them sometimes when you travel. They may not be getting an opportunity to study these things, but they are sincerely interested. You should be compassionate, you should be friendly with them, you should be compassionate with them. That's called Karuna. So Maitri means friendliness, Karuna means compassion. You should not look down upon them because they are not advanced spiritual seekers like you. So we should be compassionate. Mudita, there are those, sometimes we may come across people who are even more advanced than us in spiritual life. We should not be jealous. We should not be intolerant. We should rather rejoice when we see people who are more advanced than us. Because that appreciation will help us in our own spiritual evolution, spiritual progress. So that idea is, maybe we'll discuss this when we discuss the 33rd Sutra of Samadhipada. That's what actually Patanjali is referring to in this 23rd Sutra of Vibhudipada. Maitri Adishu Belani, what he says is, Maitri Karuna Mudita iti Tisro Bhavana. 3 types of mental attitudes. One is friendship, good understanding with fellow spiritual seekers, compassion, understanding with those who are less fortunate than us, and also there are those who who are more advanced than us, and we should be mudita. I mean, we should rejoice when we see people who are more advanced. Tatra bhudeshu sukhideshu maitri bhavaitva maitri belam labhade. So here Vyasa says, when we do samyama on this ideal of friendship, comradeship with fellow spiritual seekers, then that yogi will be able to make himself an endearing figure. He will be able to be known. He will be known as a friend of everyone. When he does the samyama, some mental faculty evolves in his mental system, which makes people believe that this man is our friend. That's the idea behind. Again, dukkideshu karunam bhavaitva karunabalam labhate. Similarly, when a yogi practices samyama on karuna, compassion, appreciation and compassion towards those who are less fortunate than us, but good people, spiritual seekers, we should have a sense of compassion. If we do that, when we do samyama on that particular ideal of compassion, what happens? We ourselves will be known as an embodiment of compassion. Maybe you can see, if you look at this idea, comes again and again. It's a recurring theme in many of the dialogues that Buddha had with Ananda and others. So you find in the Sutta Pitaka, and also you find in the Dhammapada, you find these ideas are explained as the ideal characteristic of a wise spiritual man. It's called 26th Varga. In Pali we call Bogga. The 26th chapter of the Dhammapada is Brahmana Bogga, means chapter dealing with Brahmana. Brahmana in the Dhammapada means the wise spiritual person, the spiritual person, the enlightened spiritual person. That's the sense in which the word Brahmana in Pali, Brahmana in Sanskrit, is used in the Sutta, in the Dhammapada. So, it also talks about the need to practice some yama on karuna. And then punyashileshu mudidam bhavaitva mudidabalam labhati. Then, similarly, if a yogi practices on this ideal of appreciation towards those who are more advanced than us, an appreciation, admiration for those who are more learned, more advanced than us, then what happens? What the yogi concentrates on, I mean the ideal on which he practices samyama, that power comes to him. You can find this in everyday life. What you appreciate in others, that's a quality that you want to have for yourself. And if you sincerely appreciate a great quality in another person, slowly you will inherit that quality. Again, if you find fault with a person, slowly you will find that fault comes to us. We inherit that fault also. It is very interesting. If you admire people who are philanthropic, generous, kind-hearted, compassionate, there is every chance that one day you will become a compassionate person. But if you go on criticizing, oh, this person is greedy, there is a chance that one day you may be a greedy person. So what we find in others, we have a tendency to inherit, mentally inherit ourselves. So that's why a yogi practices samyama on maitri, and he himself becomes an embodiment of maitri, friendliness, friendship. He practices samyama on karuna, compassion, and he himself becomes an embodiment of compassion. And he practices samyama on this idea of appreciation of higher qualities among others, then he inherits those qualities. That's the idea behind. So I think we will stop now, and now we have interaction, maybe for about half an hour. Most welcome. You are most welcome to ask questions. It's wonderful. Thank
you. In our text, there is a 22nd sutra, Etena Shabda Yantardhana Muktam.
Excuse me, where did you find?
Now in the Mantrapushpam book, Vibhutivada, the verse number 22 is Etena Shabda Yantardhana Muktam.
That is Yoga Sutra commentary.
No, not commentary, it's the text of Patanjali. 22nd sutra is Etena Shabda.
Wait a minute, because there are certain. Just a minute. Oh, yes, thank you. And that's what I mentioned. In fact, Etena Shabdadhyantardhanam Muktam Veditavyam. This particular phrase is included as part of Vyasa's commentary on 21st Sutra in the popular versions. So there are two ways in which these versions can differ from each other. One, there are one or two Yoga Sutras which differ to Vijnanavada school of Buddhism, one of the idealistic schools of Buddhism, like Shunyavada, Nagarjuna, Vijnanavada, Vasubandhu, Nignaga and others. So that is sometimes that is considered very interpolation. So sometimes if you take that into consideration, then Yoga Sutra will have 196 sutras. Like that, this one, Etena Shabdadhi Antardhanam Uktam Vedidavyam. What it means is, like this, as mentioned earlier, when a yogi is able to separate Rupa from Rupi, form from the object, then what happens? The yogi is able to block himself from the view of another person, because the other person is not able to see the form of yogi. So unless you see the form, you won't see the object. So that particular phrase, it's a sentence, not a phrase. It is considered to be part of Vyasa's commentary. So Vyasa Bhashya sometimes is interpreted differently by other commentators. Some of them detached this statement and made it and converted into a separate sutra. Okay, that's a simple. Yeah, thank you for pointing out.
Maharaj, I have a question about the Vyasa commentary to the 18th Sutra.
Yeah.
The dialogue between the two Bhagavans.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful passage, and it describes something so exquisite. It's very hard to put into words.
Yeah, that's it. Attaidam akhyanam suyade bhagavado jagi savesya samskara sakshar karna deshasu mahasargeshu, etc. So there's a story, the story talks about a great sage. His name is Jagishavya, and he did samyama and he got saksharkara, and then he could see his own previous incarnations in 10 Mahasargas. 10 Mahasargas could mean maybe trillions and quadrillions of years. So it's a mind-boggling calculus. That's why I didn't enter that particular subject. And then what happens, and then once another sage called Avatya, Bhagavan Avatya Rishi, he approached this Jaigishya and then asked him, you have taken incarnations in these 10 Mahasargas. let us say quadrillions of life cycles, and you're born as insects, human beings. You have different manifestations. Sometimes you are born as celestial, divine beings. Sometimes as human beings. Sometimes as animals, insects, and so on. Now, he asked this question: what did you go through? Either painful experiences or happy, joyful experiences? That is the question that this sage Avatya asked this Jagishya. So that's why Deva Manusheshu Puna Punarupadyamanena Sukadukhayoho Kim Adhigam Upalabdhamiti. So which of these two did you have more or less? Either painful experiences or joyful experiences? This question. The answer is very philosophical. Now, and Avatya again continued. Among these 10 Mahasargas, you got this jnanam. Therefore, everything is dukkha itself. So what means? Dukkham sampasyada deva manusheshu punapunarupadyamanena kinjit ranibhudam sat sarvam dukkhamiva pratyevami. Means the reply that came from the sage was simple. He said, Jaigishavya, the sage Jaigishavya, gave a very wonderful philosophical response to the sage Avatya. That means, whatever I have gone through, everything, yet kinjit tat anubhudam tat sarvam dukkhameva. Whatever I experienced, everything was pain only. Now, this, remember Vyasa is actually quoting this mythological story. That's because Vyasa, he in his commentary on the 15th Sutra of Sadhanapada, that is Parinama, Tapa, Samskara, Dukkha mentioned here. When he talks of Parinama Dukkha, the Parinama Dukkha means the ability to feel incompleteness, a kind of incompleteness or absence of fulfillment, even when you have everything going on well for you. Suppose we have lots of money, big job, wonderful people, everything going on. Like Buddha, he was a prince. His father didn't allow him to have any idea of the dark, the unhappy side of life. And Buddha had a very wonderful, easy, luxurious life. But he felt a kind of incompleteness when he saw a dead body being taken to the cremation ground, when he saw a sick man, and when he saw an old man. So old age, sickness and death. What does it mean? So these three visions made him aware of the painful reality behind even the so-called luxurious life. And it is this awareness of incompleteness that actually becomes a transformative force in his life. That's why it's called Parinama Dukkha. And Vyasa in his commentary says, this dukkha is yoginameva krishnadi. This feeling of incompleteness can happen only to a yogi, means to an advanced spiritual person. If you are a very cultured, refined person, then if you have read great books and led a pure life, let's say generally, if you are some enlightened person, then even you have a very good job, everything wonderful, still you feel a kind of incompleteness unless you take to spiritual life. So that is actually the beginning of higher evolution in life. We are able to evolve to a higher level, not physical evolution, not biological evolution, evolution at a higher level, only when we can experience a feeling of incompleteness, even when everything is going on all right for us at the empirical, the material level. So that is actually the same idea comes in this dialogue between the great sage Jagishavya and this
Avakya.
Avakya. Yeah, just thank you. Thank you for referring to this. It gives me an opportunity to explain more. Thank you.
Well, it closes with the Bhagavan saying that there's such a bliss beyond.
Yeah.
And in various translations that becomes quite beautiful as well.
Yeah, this dialogue is very interesting, but I thought so mind-boggling mythology. So, but anyway, thank you. I'm happy that you could see the significance, the spiritual significance of this dialogue. Apparently, they are talking about taking lives in millions, quadrillions of life cycles. Totally irrational, you may believe if you are a scientist or a biologist. But there's a great spiritual, metaphysical significance, a message behind this great dialogue. Thank you so much.
What I appreciate about it is that it's a natural question.
Yeah.
If we could locate somebody
Precisely.
who's been beyond the gunas, then we would ask them the same question. And we would wait for the answer. And here Vyasa has referred to this imagined scene. Thank you.
An enlightened listener who asks a very enlightened question is a blessing to the speaker, really. There is no greater reward for a speaker than having a few wonderful enlightened listeners. That's the greatest blessing we can ask for. Okay, thank you. Okay.
There is a question on YouTube from Mad. The question is, you explained the sutra about Maitri Bhava for Prasadam. In broken relations with loved ones, mind will be constantly aggressive and burning. Ego is a big issue to establish Maitri. So he's asking for request for some practical advice on establishing Maitri Bhava in broken relationships.
In different life situations, people can separate from each other without hating each other. You may not be able to practice Maitri with everyone. In fact, the sutra, its significance is a little different. What it says, we should have Maitri Bhava, we should have friendship, close association with people who are more or less like us. So there is no chance, no possibility of dealing with broken relations. The word Maitri is used as a tool in our interaction with people who are more or less like us. So they are also fellow spiritual seekers. They are also interested in Vedanta. When you travel to even discuss higher ideas, with such people, Maitri friendship is important because it reinforces our own spiritual life, our own spiritual idea. And then, of course, there are those who are less fortunate. We should be compassionate. It's very obvious. And then we should admire those who are more advanced. Then there's a fourth category, Upeksha. So Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshana, Punya, etc. That 33rd Sutra of Samadhipada. The Upeksha is not mentioned in this. Of course, it's mentioned in the commentary, but Upeksha is a mental attitude, keeping a long distance, keeping away from people whose association can disturb your own spiritual disciplines, your own convictions. That is very dangerous, actually. Because if you have to interact with people whose words and associations all the time disturb your own convictions and your own spiritual life, it can make you doubtful about the spiritual path you have chosen for yourself. is very, very dangerous for the beginners in spiritual life. So that's why Vyasa himself says, Papasileshu upekshanadu bhavana tadaka tasyam nasti samadhi iti. So the point is, you don't have to practice samyama on this upeksha, keeping a long distance. That ideal need not be concentrated upon or focused upon. But that is something we have to keep in our mind. The other three ideals are very creative, very constructive. The fourth one, that is upeksha, means indifference, keeping a long distance from people whose association can disturb our life, can create distractions. See, suppose you are practicing some spiritual discipline with great reverence, and that helps you a lot, and that is a blessing to you. But suppose you happen to meet somebody who all the time criticizes, belittles your convictions, what you follow with great reverence, that person ridicules. But you have to, he may be your boss in the office, so you cannot fight with him. He may be your colleague perhaps, so you cannot be away from him. But when he talks maybe in a way that creates disturbance to you, mentally you can keep a distance. You can develop a filtering mechanism in the mind. That is called upeksha. So Patanjali is actually recommending 4 tools, psychological tools, that we can use with great effect in our interaction with people, different life situations. So that's the idea behind. So if you have got people who disturb you, who create problems for you, who questions your convictions and ridicules your spiritual disciplines, you need not fight, because that also with the opposite of upeksha. You should keeping a long distance means mentally keeping yourself immune to the impact, the destructive impact of wrong ideas coming from wrong association. That's the idea behind. Yeah.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Yeah, namaskar.
In Sutra 23, there is a reference to Arishta.
Oh, yeah, Arishta.
Is there any documentation?
Oh, Arishta, yeah. 23 years. Oh, actually, this it deals with certain scriptures you can find in medical science, the Ayurvedic medical science, Charaka, Sutras, Vagbhada. You can find many Ayurvedic, traditional Ayurvedic physicians who, along with their studies of Ayurvedic text, practice a lot of meditation. They live an ascetic life. They have many of the traditional Ayurvedic physicians that I know. They've been practicing, families practicing Ayurveda for maybe 2000 years or longer. They don't do anything commercial. So along with this, with what is known in medical sciences, in the works of Charaka, Susruda, Vagpada, and they also do a lot of meditation, puja. They also get some spiritual instruction from their own teachers, called initiation. They get an insight into the nature of disease. There are still not too many. Most of the doctors today are graduates coming from Ayurvedic colleges. They study their text, of course. They make use of the latest technical tools. But the traditional Ayurvedic physicians, they have got much more resources. Along with their studies, Gurukula, the traditional studies, what takes several years of studies in Sanskrit and also Ayurvedic text, they also practice a lot of meditation and the practice. That will give them power of intuition into the nature of illness. So that's why Arishtavya means certain signs which are indicated in scriptures about a person who is approaching death. That's a different thing. I don't know how far scientifically can prove them, but there is an exceptional breed of Ayurvedic physicians who stand apart from the commercial doctors. The whole life is dedicated to that. That's true in all disciplines, everywhere you can find. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I think we have just 5 minutes more, and if you don't have any questions, yeah.
Pranam, yeah. Maharaj.
Oh, yeah, most welcome. Please.
I wanted to ask you, Maharaj, if there's a verse in the Patanjali Sutras that allows, using the samyaya to enable a yogi to fly in the air.
Yeah. In the Vibhudipada elsewhere you come across the, Anima, Laghima, Mahima, Ishitum, Basitum, all the Ashtasiddhi, 8 powers. So it mentions there, but I cannot give a reply to this because Laghima, Anima means you become very small, Laghima means you become very light. So there are sutras, of course, commentaries. Sutras will tell you, and also some commentaries tell you, because when these Ashtasiddhi called 8 powers, Anima and Laghima, these two. Anima means becoming a bit too small, tiny, like size of an atom, and Laghima means very light. So these powers will help you to fly and all that. The commentaries will make some passing statements, but there are no detailed discussions or anything. No.
There are no more questions, Maharaj.
Yeah, thank you so much, thank you. Now, before we conclude, I have to make some very important announcements. One announcement is there will be no Yoga Sutra class next Sunday. That is, next Sunday, I think, is 28th May.
No, 30th.
Next Sunday, sorry, I think it is 30th May. Please.
Yes.
Next Sunday is May 30th. There will be no Patanjali Yoga Sutra class. Okay, that is one thing. But at the same time, we will have Gita class on Friday, May 28th. So please remember, we will have Gita class. We will continue the class on May 28th, Friday at 7:30. We will hold the class. On May 30th, Sunday, there will be no Yoga Sutra class. That's because on May 31st, on Memorial Day, we will have a very important program, a special online Memorial Day. Please, those of you, please please just mute your system so that I can read this. Voice will not be disturbed. So, we have a very important program, Vedanta Society of Northern California, San Francisco, special online Memorial Day program, Monday, May 31st, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. We will have 2 presentations, talks, and then music. The program will begin at 9 a.m. and it will be over at 12 noon. So please, all of you, please remember, you can see this program. The program will be available for viewing at Zoom for May 31st program and YouTube May 31st program. So we will announce this event in our website this evening. So please remember, we will have no Yoga Sutra class on Sunday, May 30th. Next Sunday there will be no Yoga Sutra class. That's because next day morning we will have a very important program on Memorial Day. That is May 31st. The program begins at 9 a.m. and it will be over by 12 noon. 2 talks, question answers. You are most welcome to ask questions, to discuss subjects on the presentations, and there will be music, devotional music, 2 talks, question answer sessions, and all the important wonderful things. So please remember, all of you, please note down in a calendar, May 31st, Monday, 9 a.m. to 12 noon. That's something. Another important, I already mentioned, Bhagavad Gita classes will continue on 28th May, Friday. Okay, thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
The recording has stopped.
Pranam. Thank you, Ma'am.